before I start. I haven't seen that pop up yet. And there it is, brilliant. So Buradar, good morning everybody, thank you for joining us. I know it's a really busy time, so really appreciate your time with us this morning, and welcome to everybody in the north. Enjoy being together in person, which is lovely as well. Okay, so the first session we're going to look at is looking at effective transition. We all know that transition is and has been highlighted as a very important part of a young person's life and transition through their education. And there's been an increased focus in this, particularly after the pandemic. Really, really important that we get these transition arrangements correct. There's been a significant amount of funding through COVID and post-COVID to support extra initiatives to support transition. And hopefully you saw the benefits of some of that money and you were able to put some initiatives in place if you were in post over the last few years. I know some schools had extra learning coaches, extra mentors, additional lessons for catch up, all those things that our learners missed. And I know we're coming out the other side of that now, but the Renew and Reform Act and Post-16 Transitions Plan, which I'll pop in the chat for you to have a look at in case you haven't seen that document, really looks at right through to 2026 and how we're going to support our learners because of the effects of COVID and the lost learning time. So transition and learning and caring for our learners is an extended priority from Welsh Government going forward. So as I said, we're going to have a little look at transition. We're going to look at why it's important to have really robust plans for transition within your setting, what effective transition really looks like, and by effective we mean has real impact, and you can see the benefits of that. And then who should be involved in that transition process? Is it you on your own working your socks off, or are there people within school that should be supporting that process with you? And hopefully that is already in place. Okay, so we all have a duty, and we know this, to share independent information, advice and guidance with all our young people within our school. And we need to consider when that starts and how we do that as a school and setting to suit our learners and suit our pathways of our learners. This is regardless of whatever option our learners wish to take. We need to be very open-minded with our transition planning. It's not just about planning if we're in a school that is right through to post-16, to keeping them within our school. We need to give that impartial information, advice and guidance so that they can either go on to a world of work, workplace learning, onto FE college, another school sixth form, or within our school and remain in there. And I know that can be difficult because we've all got our pressures with retention, etc., and we want to keep our learners, and if that's the right place for them, then so you should, and that's great. But if it isn't, all that information needs to be there for them. So just to start us off and warm us up, in the chat please, could you let me know who's involved in post-16 transition within your school? Because when I think about your 6 into 7 transition, every man and his dog is involved. And then when I think about post-16, does that always happen? So within your setting, who supports post-16 transition? Please pop that in the chat. So all your plans, getting your year 11s into year 12 or onto, just reading the chat, sorry there, no problem. Okay, getting them to remain in your sixth form or to move on to college. How many people are involved in that?
I think, Emma, it might be worth mentioning for our college colleagues here today, who in their organisation works with schools to aid that transition.
Absolutely. Good, some various answers coming in there. I know you can read them. So SLT, and then heads of year 12, 13. So just sort of sixth form teams and SLT. Some have gone a little bit further and got their heads of year 11 in there, which I'm glad to see. Careers advisors coming in. Feeder schools, that's great, from Key Stage 4. So if they're taking them in from elsewhere, that's absolutely brilliant. Parents, lovely to see that parent involvement's being considered there. Key Stage 5 subject staff with taster sessions, brilliant. Assistant head teacher with responsibility for that. A couple of people still typing, so we'll give them another minute or so. Welcome if you've just joined us. We're just popping in the chat who supports year 11 into year 12 or onto FE transition within your school or college setting? What partnerships have you got? Who do you work with? Good, the Elenco mentioned there as well. Social work are really important now. We're looking at all of our learners, and that's really important as we go through our session, and Diane will be focusing on that in just a few moments. Great, some lovely answers there. Brilliant. So hopefully we are starting to get the idea there's a much bigger team than just ourselves to have effective transition within our schools, and there'll be an opportunity to discuss and reflect that and look at where you're at in your school and whether you can have some additional support if that's needed going forward. So I can see some people still coming in. Welcome if you've just joined us. Great, okay, so you can see on the slide there, this is from an Estyn report, and it says that, obviously you can read it, but I'll summarise. Schools and colleges in Wales are expected to work with each other to facilitate the transition of learners, and they should work together to provide advice and guidance to learners on educational pathways, so that's every pathway available to them, and careers available. Interestingly now, and especially when we're looking at transition from school into a different provider, maybe an FE college, they should share information about individual learners, including their achievements, well-being, behaviour, attendance and qualification outcomes when they transition from one provider to another. And I think sometimes that information isn't readily shared, and we need to be aware that we've got to support these learners so that when they go to a new setting, they are supported and put onto the right courses from the very first moment. So making sure that if it isn't our responsibilities ahead of sixth form, whose is that responsibility to make sure all the necessary information is going to the new provider for that learner. Okay, so making sure of that. Does anybody want to comment on that? Does anybody find that a difficult process to liaise with people, or is that something that's quite straightforward? Happy to just unmute and chip in there if you think you've got something to add to that. Are there open channels of communication? Oh, I've put you on the spot there first thing in the morning, haven't I? Pop it in the chat if that's easier. Is that an easy process to share information with external providers? Do you feel that you're well informed and you know exactly what's happening, or is that something that we could help you with? Liz, I can see you've unmuted, thank you.
Yeah, no, what we've started doing the last couple of years, which is really useful, is we go into our feeder schools, but this is for our 3 main feeder schools. We get kids coming from other schools, we don't do this, but we sit down and we have a meeting with the head of year and their wellbeing officer. So we talk academic and we talk in terms of well-being, and we go through the whole list of students who've applied, and that's just really useful. It's only informal and we just make some informal notes, but our well-being officer comes along and our attendance officer, and yeah, that's really useful.
That gives them the right start, so you know that the learner coming into the setting right from the beginning then, isn't it, for that
yeah, because
right
2 years can go quite quickly, can't it? We find, you know, they're in, they're out, and at least you've got a little bit of context before they join then, yeah.
Oh, fantastic. Anybody else sharing good practice like that? Anything else going on with other schools? No, I think that is quite rare, Liz, and well done for starting that initiative. And maybe that's something we can look at within your school and setting. Do you take from other schools in the local area that haven't got sixth forms? And does that partnership work need to be increased? So thank you. That's great to hear. Okay, we're going to start heading towards a breakout room and just getting you discussing just for 10 minutes, please, this morning. So why is it important to have robust transition plans, and how do you ensure equity for all your learners? So when you're planning for your transition, how do you make sure there is equity, that every learner gets the advice and guidance that they need? Okay, and we'll come into a bit more depth later on in terms of effective transition and the whole process. But why is it important to your school setting? Why is it important to your parents? Why is it important to your learners? And why is it important that your plans are shared right across your school? So a couple of questions there. Why is it really important for your setting to have robust plans? Why is it important to parents and learners? And why is it important that the whole school knows about your transition planning?
We spoke about sort of what we got in place, to be honest, and one of the schools you talk about was Pencoedra, who sort of share sixth form in terms of Whitmo, and talked about like they have 2 heads of year and what sort of they have like a live document with year 11, trying to then see what their current progress is and to see what choices they have and then trying to sort of use the form tutors then to sort of chase them up to make sure the right people are applying for the sort of right courses. I spoke about Fitzallen in terms of what we have in place then as well. We have quite a robust transition. We're very data heavy, so we put data in every 6 weeks. And then in January, we met with myself, SMT, heads of maths, English and science, and we put pupils into banding. So all 300 of year 11 go into bands based on their current attainment and predicted attainment in the summer. For example, if their colour is green, they'll be able to pick 4 A levels, and other colours maybe they can pick 1 A level and 2 level 3 BTECs, right down to we have a level 2 provision. We think pupils will need that support, resit their maths, English, and doing things like level 2 travel and tourism. So all of them are banded. Then we have an options, obviously, assemblies throughout the year. We have a information evening where the parents can come up and the pupils can meet the different departments, and then ultimately they make choices then within SIMS, and so we get an idea of building the curriculum. So we know what people want to choose next year, and hopefully then we'll lower sort of ideal numbers for each sort of subject and how we can plan the times for next year. Obviously, it all changes on results. So on results day, we'll come in like 1 or 2 days earlier, and then I'll go through with the head year 11, colour in all the pupils and put them in the correct bands. Hopefully, most of them are the same, changing once here and there. And when they sit down with me or another SMT, they have their choices they've already made in January with them. And then we'll have a look and say, look, are those still the choices you want to make, or do we need to change them? For example, if they've done 4 A levels, but they didn't do quite well, they didn't get the Bs in science or maths, they can't take those subjects then. So then we have to adapt what they take. But on the main, most people who make those choices, they're correct, so it allows us to build the correct curriculum. But we also, those people we don't offer choices to because maybe behaviour, attendance, myself and SMT, we'll all interview them. So they book an interview slot with us, they come and sit down and we'll explain the reasons to why they haven't got provision at the moment. And we give them an ultimatum basically and say, look, you need to work really hard over the next 3-4 months. Your attendance needs to be good. And then obviously you need to improve your sort of progress. And then we'll have a look at to see if there is a provision for you. And that boosts their motivation. And then hopefully we see an upturn in their sort of productivity. So yeah, that's the type of thing we have in place, and then we discussed Whitmore and Pencoedra as well then.
Oh, great. And so do you start that sort of transition planning with them at the start of year 11, or does it start before then? And I know this is probably dipping into our next breakout room a little bit, so we'll not go too deep on that, but do you start that at the start of year 11? Or is
it's right at the start, to be fair. Yeah, after October half term, I was in contact with head year 11 and we booked email out to all the different heads of department to book when they're going to come in to do the the assemblies with them and talk about the subject and what's on offer. So that literally starts straight after October half term. On a weekly basis, then they have the heads of department or subject leaders of A-level, BTEC go in and talk about what's available. Then early on in October, we have that information evening where the parents, the guardians come up with them and they can go around and see each sort of subject and look at what's on offer. Speak to past pupils is really good. We bring them in and they speak about their experiences on the subject, and they really find that invaluable. But sometimes they think, teachers will just tell them what they want to hear just to get them on. But when we have past pupils and pupils who are currently studying it as well, they really find that invaluable then, asking them what they really like. So that works really well.
Brilliant, thank you. And I bet that looking at the benefits of that robust planning is that increases your retention, increases the retention of your learners once they come into year 12 as well. So some lovely planning there, and we'll certainly look at that in our next breakout room in more detail as well. Thanks, Matt.
Okay.
Great. From room 2, Greg's group, anyone there? Greg Leslie's group.
Hello. Yeah. Yeah. We were just discussing, because I'm from FE and the other two in the group were from schools. So I think the processes that kind of schools operate on of this, pretty much from year 6 all the way through. In FE we've adapted to kind of more of that, really. I mean, we tend to get the learners, come from school, and the only information that we really get after we've done things like open days and the sort of kind of PR stuff is the GCSE results. I mean, that's the only bit that we get. So at FE, we are missing that little bit of knowledge, that pastoral stuff of what's been going on within schools. So we are looking at trying to improve that. For who's responsible for that? Because we're so big, it becomes, like the marketing department's involved in the kind of promotion, and then learner services is involved in kind of going into the schools and kind of recruiting that way. But it becomes, we get kind of like an initial registration for the course, and then we kind of follow that as we work our way through. But because we're only kind of like 2 years, it's kind of more reactive. So we're reacting to kind of what the learners are like, and different schools may have had different processes. So it's a little bit of a mix. But over the years, I've seen we have gone more towards a kind of like a school model to make the kind of transition easier, really.
That's really interesting, isn't it? And I think it's so important, isn't it, that we see our role as year 11 leaders, within a school, and post-16 leaders, to share that information so those students do get an equitable start when they move on to a new establishment. So that is something that maybe we can look at, or you can think about as practitioners, if your learners are moving on, even if it's not your responsibility, is your head of year 11 or the SLT member passing on that information to give them every opportunity to be successful and not be neat, because they feel cared for and well known as soon as they move into their new environment. Because that's, as you say, you've got a huge cohorts coming into you, haven't you? So that's a difficult task when you haven't got all the information. So considerations for schools to help FE colleges, please, on that. Thanks, Greg. That's really invaluable feedback. Becca Bishop's group. Anybody in there?
I'll do that one. I was nominated.
Thanks, Jan.
I said I'll do it now, so then I don't have to speak later.
It's not that daunting, is it? Honestly. All friends here.
So we looked at, yes, what plans, but why is it important? And we looked at, like, well, it's really quick turnaround, isn't it? They're in and then they're out. So the more we know, the better for everybody involved. So it was important because to be equitable, we have to know these learners, not just the data, but we need to know where they're coming from, we need to know their families, we need to know what's happened to them before. So as a setting, I did it last year, and I'm going to do it again this year, even though it took a long time to meet with every child and their parents in one-to-one, so that you've got that knowledge of, like, what is their home life like, where are they coming from, so that, and to also make sure that they're on the right courses for them, for the learners. So again, looking at the data, colour coding from SMIDs, are they level 2, are they level 3, so that our retention is, we do keep, so they're in the right place. There's no point in having them, on our books. It's not bums on seats, because they will just, they'll leave, so it's having that robust transition to make sure they are in the right place for them, and that we're giving them, the best opportunities to be successful. For the parents, things that come out of transition, which was useful this year, information that you wouldn't necessarily think of. For example, we have an issue with transport at the minute, which wouldn't have come to my attention unless we'd have done transition. You get, Bridgend won't pay for any transport under 3 miles. So if you want to go to your local sixth form, they won't pay for you for a bus pass. But if you want to go down the valley to the college, or to Cardiff and Vale, or somewhere else, then you get free transport. So that kind of information would not have come to light unless we'd have been talking to the parents, been in transition, and talking to the pupils about, why are you not staying, why do you want to go here, and so getting that information was key, so then we can obviously do something about it. And then for the whole school, it's the equity again, isn't it? It's about looking at, as teachers and the heads of faculties, so that everybody has that information and they can use it effectively, ensure that the learners are successful. And that was it.
No, that's really interesting, isn't it? And interesting that you find out about transport issues from your parents and not from the local authority or the bus, you know, whoever's providing that for you. And well done for identifying that, because that would certainly be something that will help your retention and support your learners that want to stay maybe within your setting and don't want to go to the college but might be forced to just because of transport issues. And again, right students being in the right place, isn't it? Really interesting. Thank you, Sian. Steve Powers Group in room 4. Would you like to feedback there from Steve's group? I hope I've got that right. Anyone in a room that hasn't fed back would like to say something, apart from Mary's group I'll come to in a moment? Or do we think we've covered everything there? That one's a little bit quiet. We'll whiz up to you, Mary, if that's okay, if anybody would like to feedback from the north for us.
The vast majority of everything that we've talked about has been spoken by everybody there. From our point of view, really, to have a robust transition is about retention for us in North Wales. I know someone mentioned it's not bums on seats, but financially for us, the people in the building do contribute and help towards the funding of the schools in this financial climate that we've got in North Wales at the minute. And just personally for me, I think a good transition, robust transition sets a standard. And if you are engaging in pupils and parents as well, it does have a positive reflection on the school and the quality of the provision that those pupils are getting within that school is from that first impression that they get, whether that's from the open evenings that you do, the interviews that SLT and the sixth form team do, and just their sort of taster days that we put on as well. Those sort of opportunities that they get sets a standard, and that's hopefully helping with the transition process as well.
Excellent, thank you. Oh, some really good feedback to get us started, because I know we're going to go into another breakout room and look at effective transition in a little bit more detail, but you're already dipping into that, and some really good feedback. Thank you. And we are having some IT gremlins, so Sian, could you move on a slide for me, please? Brilliant. So this is, you know, the list I came up with, and you've already touched on lots of these. So by having robust transition, we're raising learner aspirations. You know, they're having that ambition, improving the retention, not just into your sixth form, but retention wherever they choose to go. They're staying within that. And with our performance measures now, our 8-week performance measure, that's really, really important. Making sure these students aren't going neat, because those figures come back to you as a school learner. If they go from a school to an FE and you don't know that they've moved on or what they're doing or whether they've stayed in that provision, is something we shouldn't miss out on. Are we following up where our learners have gone, and are they staying within the provision and advice we've given them? Because if they're not, we need to come back and look at our transition process. Was it robust enough, or did we just send them off and think, oh great, got them to college, or got them onto workplace learning, or got them to another sixth form and my job's done? Not really. We need to follow that up, and that's difficult, and that might be something you need a team of people within your setting to support and look at. You know, by having robust, we get increased opportunities for learners. We improve our learner outcomes. So everything that we do to have robust transition helps us to do that. You know, develops excellent partnership work, which might lead to further benefits for the learners and for schools and colleges and people working together in partnership beyond the transition process. And as Sian said, you know, she's looked at it and she's reviewed. It informs your self-evaluation, develops your future practice. It's really, really important that we have a robust plan that we can evaluate and continue to improve. Okay, we know it improves retention and progression and staying in things, and if we are regularly sharing information, we know that a coordinated approach makes sure that every learner's strengths, weaknesses and support needs are always met. Okay, I think I'm trying to look at some of my notes, but you've talked about so much of it. I'm not going to repeat that because time is going on. Talking about timely manner, making sure transition is done in a timely manner. When you go into your next breakout room, we'll be looking at when does that transition support start, and how does that continue, and where are the pinch points, where are the key points where you make sure that transition information is shared. And the ALM reform has really looked at supporting learners that are more vulnerable or have special educational needs. and they've really looked at that transition process, and we need to do that same process for all of our learners within school, and use maybe that act, look at the ALN Act and what can we learn from that to support our own learners as well. So in a summary, not to sort of dwell on this part for too long before we get into the next breakout room, this requires a sort of systematic partnership approach between all providers to make sure that transition is managed effectively, that the learners get the right level of support no matter where or what they want to go on and study, and that is equity. And that leads us really nicely on to Diane's next session, where we're going to look at equity and transition and a little bit about equity and how we can support our learners as they come through year 11 into year 12. So thanks, Di.
Thank you. So it was really lovely to hear Sian and Matt and Greg, to mention the equity and equality of opportunity for learners in their feedback from their last breakout room. So what we're going to spend a little bit of time now is looking at what does it actually mean when we talk about equity in education. And, this links to the work that we're talking about in terms of transition as well. So the quote on the slide here is taken from the ministerial foreword of the national mission, and it talks about the fact that education is more than a question of equality. Education must be fair to everyone, every individual, but it's not necessarily the same. So within our settings, this requires us to put in systems and processes to make sure that every learner has an equal chance of success. And it's lovely to hear Sian talk about the individual meetings with parents and students that help them to get to know their learners. So it's the knowledge of learners, of the individuals, developing an appreciation of the unique challenges and the barriers that the learners face, and then securing support to overcome such barriers. So equity is about ensuring that all our learners are provided with the resources they specifically need to have success, to the same opportunities to thrive and to be successful. And it might involve considering issues that might put particular groups or individual learners at a disadvantage. Like Sian mentioned, the fact that there's no transport to the local sixth form, that's a barrier that the school can then work at helping to overcome. It doesn't automatically mean that if we provide equity that it'll lead to equal outcomes, but simply recognising that efforts should be made to ensure that every learner has an equal opportunity to succeed. Or if we can think of it in that the difference in learner outcomes shouldn't be related to background, economic or social circumstance over which the learners have no control of this over their for themselves. So there is a recognition that to achieve the national mission, there is a need to create strong and inclusive schools, so sixth forms, colleges, special needs schools that are committed to that equity and excellence. On the screen, you will see some graphs which were taken from the statistical first release of the consistent performance measures for post-16 learning, which was released on February the 28th, just a couple of weeks ago, or last week. So what you see, what this report does, and it's linked there if you haven't already seen it, is it covers outcomes for general education and vocational education in sixth forms and colleges. And it looks at the progression across all the qualification a learner took as part of their programme, as well as the grade outcomes. Now, A-level learners' outcomes have generally improved compared to before the pandemic. Outcomes for vocational learners have been worse. So in general, grades for learners were higher across the board when compared to 2018-19. So the general increase, however, the report shows that outcomes were less equal than before the pandemic for learners with Black African, Caribbean, Black Welsh, Black British backgrounds. They didn't see the same level of rise in grades that other learners saw, and the gap between learners from the most deprived areas and the least deprived areas widened. When you scroll through the report, section 7, which is what we're going to be focusing on this morning, displays the inequality in learning outcomes between learners living in deprived and less deprived areas. And it doesn't necessarily mean that deprivation causes a learner to achieve less academically. So there may be a difference in the type of post-16 education offered within that local authority, within that deprived area. So the main measure of deprivation in this release and this report is the deprivation of the small area that a learner lives in. So it's not necessarily based on the deprivation of the specific learner. And you'll have many non-deprived learners living in deprived areas and vice versa. But the data comes from the main index of the 2019 Welsh Index of Multiple Deprivation. So the second graph there also includes a proxy learner level measure of deprivation, and this is whether a learner has been eligible for free school meals at any point during their secondary school education. So figure 7.1, this shows that the more deprived the area the learners live in, the lower their outcomes were. So outcomes for all learners were higher in 2018 and 19. Higher than in 2018, but the gap in outcomes between learners living in the most deprived and least deprived areas was wider in 2021 and 22 than before the pandemic. So 33% of learners living in the least deprived areas received 3 A stars or A's in 21-22, with only 12% of learners from the most deprived areas. So that's a gap of 21% on that 3 A stars A's category. The effect is most visible for learners getting at least 3 C's at A level. So there's a 33% point gap between achievement for learners from the most and the least deprived areas. 74% of learners in the least deprived areas received those 3 C's compared to 41 in the most deprived areas. So there is a significant difference for those learners. The second graph shows the 2 years achievement measure at A level, according to whether they've ever had eligible for free school meals during their school career. The scatter graph shows both eligible for free school meals and living in deprived areas. And again, we can see that there is a significant difference between the achievement of those who were never eligible for free school meals and those that were. And that's important for us to consider when we are planning our provision and planning our transition, so that we are aware of the extra support that these learners might need. And on the next couple of slides, what we've done is just included some information, different publications that you may find useful and that can support you in developing your understanding of deprivation, as well as supporting you in ensuring that your provision is equitable and that you're taking account of these things when you're planning your transition and your provision in your setting. So the Bevan Foundation, I'm sure you're all aware of the Bevan Foundation, but their new research reveals the extent of the hardship caused by the cost of living crisis. And this snapshot of poverty in winter 2023 is a really useful tool for anyone who wants to understand what poverty looks like in Wales. We've got higher inflation dominating the high headlines, and this latest report takes a deeper look at who is being pushed into severe hardship by rising living costs. And you may sort of think, well, this isn't relevant to me, but I think when we're working with young people, I think it's very relevant so that we understand where they're coming from. It's not about, Greg mentioned he only gets their GCSE grades, but having an understanding maybe of where they're coming from will help us to support our learners better. So The report looks at 3 sections. It looks at, the first section sets out to provide an overview of how people in Wales are managing rising costs. The section looks in greater detail at the experiences of those groups that are most affected, and the final section explores the impact on people's health. Some stark facts: more than 1 in 8 households either sometimes, often, or always do not have enough for all the basics, and large numbers of people are going without essentials, including 4 in 10 going without heating in their home, and 1 in 4 eating smaller meals or skipping meals in their entirety. And having an understanding of those hardships can help us when we're supporting our young people. It's not, the cost of living crisis is not affecting everyone in Wales equally. The extent of the hardship faced by some groups in Wales is worrying. Among the groups that are being most significantly affected are people in receipt of benefits. So people who are on universal credit are 5 times as likely to report that they sometimes, often, or always struggle to afford the basics as the general population. Disabled people whose condition limits them a lot, over half, have gone without heating in their home over the past 3 months. Households with children are twice as likely to be in debt as a result of the cost of living crisis. Adults under the age of 65, twice as likely to report that their households sometimes, often, or always struggle to afford the basics as households over 65, and unpaid carers. And I'm sure you've got many carers, young carers, within your settings as well. They're more likely to have borrowed money between October and January than people who are not carers. So this report just gives us a sort of an overview of the current situation and the hardships that some families that we are working with will be facing. I think it's important for us to understand that. The first image on this slide was taken from a RADI document, and some of you might already be RADI schools or be aware of RADI, but it begins much lower down in schools, and they call it the RADI catalyst. So quite simply, at the start of a key stage, they flag up a pupil as having untapped potential and ensure that everything is done to close that gap. And it means setting the same expectations as their non-disadvantaged peer, because sometimes we will set, or school, set lower targets for school for learners that may be experiencing disadvantage because they don't have the same support maybe that our non-disadvantaged students have. RADI is a long-term heart and minds approach. It helps schools and settings to become more equitable in all aspects of their education. They provide and they make sure that those learners who need it most get the extra help that helps them to get there. And there's a link there to the RADI project that you can, if you want to find out some more information. This other document, The Cost of Having Fun at School. For many children or learners, events, celebrations, special activities, and we're coming on to enrichment later on this morning, but all of those activities are some of the things that they remember most about their school. But we know that some learners will look forward to those activities and gain a lot from them, and that's why they're important. However, some of our children will maybe dread those kind of activities because it draws attention to the fact that of their family's financial circumstances. They're a frequent, unwelcome reminder maybe that they're not able, unlike their peers, they're not able to join in with those activities and all the opportunities that the school has to offer. So this report captures the experiences of pupils and parents. And there are, I think there were about 8,000 learners that took part in this project across England, Scotland, Wales, and they worked in partnership with Children North East. And the key findings were that school fundraising and charity days add to financial pressures on families. Some families, pupils who are struggling to get by, being asked to regularly donate to different charity and fundraising days at school, they found that difficult. Not everyone is able to take part in and enjoy dress-up days and non-uniform days. Young people have, in the report, said about the cost and social pressures involved in those, and that sometimes makes them feel embarrassed or left out. Some cases, teachers reported that pupils, learners would be missing school on those days. School fairs and book sales highlight differences between lower income pupils and their peers. Expensive leavers celebrations put learners and parents in an impossible situation because they can't afford maybe to attend or buy the prom dress or whatever it is. So those are bigger challenges for lower income parents and families who don't want their children, their learners, to miss out but can't afford the significant cost. The EMA, recently, I think it was last week or the week before, the Education Minister Jeremy Miles has recently committed to a review of the value of the education maintenance allowance and its eligibility thresholds. So the £30 a week, I think that's been unchanged since the mid 2000s. I think that's changed in a significantly long time. And similarly, the eligibility threshold has been frozen for more than a decade. So it's good news to hear that the Welsh Government are committed to reviewing that allowance. I think in the recent discussion in the Senedd, I think there was 37 votes to 13 amongst the Assembly members, showing the strength of voting in favour of reviewing, showing the strength of feeling among members on this topic. So that is good news for some of our learners. And then the last document I would just want to share with you is this document, which is a collaborative piece of work with sections written by education and poverty specialists from Child Poverty Action Group, the National Education Union Cymru and Children North East, and it draws on the learning and examples from their existing projects and research. So some of the bits of the other ones that I've mentioned are incorporated into this. So in Wales, as in other UK nations, there's a strong association, as we've seen with the Post-16 measures, there's a strong association between the wealth of a child's family and their educational attainment. Research shows that as a family's income rises, the education attainment of the children also goes up. So, in fact, increasing family income is the single most effective thing a government can do to increase educational attainment. So it's difficult to measure household poverty and link it with attainment and outcomes of individual learners. But in most studies, we use the EFSM model as a proxy for poverty at home. And that you can see on one of the previous slides in the graph was an indicator that those children, the gap between those who are eligible for free school meals and not, has widened over the last couple of years. I think it's important for us to consider all of this when we're looking at transition and we're looking at supporting our learners. I think all of these factors are important just for us to have in our minds so that we make sure, or we do our best to make sure that what we're providing is equitable, and that for those learners that are in areas of deprivation or are in households where they're living in hardship, that we're able to provide support for those that they achieve. And then I'm going to hand over back to Emma.
Brilliant, thanks Diane. And I know it's a huge Welsh Government priority, so that information is really vital for us all to consider. So thank you for that. Right, time is whizzing on, so we'll go for about 12 minutes. I'm going to do a little bit shorter. I hope to have 15, but just to give us a few minutes then to have a quick recap when we come out of the breakout rooms before we have a coffee, which we'll all be down for by then, I'm sure. So we've got a bit of a theory behind us. We know robust transition planning is really, really important, but now what does effective transition look like for post-16 learners? And we've talked about that. I'm sure that came into discussions earlier, but who's involved? When do you do that? What are you doing? But not just what we're doing, because I think a lot of us are doing really good jobs, aren't we? We're doing the open evenings, we're doing the one-to-one interviews, we're colour coding them and making sure they're making the right choices. We might be working in partnership with other people really effectively, but what are we doing that really has impact and equity for all of our learners? So when you feedback something that's really a little bit different or something that's really had impact, and you can prove that it's had an effect on retention or well-being or whatever it might be to support that transition. So the who, what, when, why, and how, what methods did you use to create effective transition opportunities? There's lots of information there. You might want to take a quick screenshot or a photo on your phone before you go into the breakout room, so you've got those questions under your belt. I'm sorry for going quite quickly there. I'm very aware of time whizzing by. So I'll just give you a second to take a picture. So we're going to go for about 12 minutes into our breakout rooms. What does effective transition look like? Let's just try and think outside the box, not the things we've already mentioned. What does it look like? How could it be improved? And start reflecting on how you could maybe change that within your setting to really support those learners and make it equitable for all. So thank you, Helen. If you could go into those breakout rooms, and we'll see you in about 12 minutes, 10:12. Welcome back all, welcome back. And I completely fibbed to you. It was 10 minutes because Helen told me she's no way she can do 12 minutes, and that was a ridiculous request. So sorry if you got cut short and you were timing that. Brilliant. So hopefully 10 minutes gave you a taster of some chats there. We've just got a few minutes. I don't want to delay your coffee. Any feedback from any rooms, any willing volunteers to sort of share something that you thought was maybe a little bit different or unique that you've heard, or something you thought, God, that really had some impact and you'd like to share that? And we've had some great discussions already. Just a few minutes before we go for a coffee break, that would be great. Any willing volunteers, please?
Yeah, my mic is working again now. It's Paul. So
yeah, thanks, Paul.
Yeah, great. Hopefully I can speak on behalf of the group. Yeah, my colleague spoke earlier on. That's Greg. We're an FE college, Crosskeys campus of Coleg Gwent. So we do things slightly different to the schools, but what the general theme in our breakout room was giving students in year 11 a taste of what to expect at AS level. And we've got different ways of doing that, but we all agreed that the students experience in some cases a day as an A-level student, or simply coming to the college for a morning and going into different subjects, it made the transition easier and less daunting. And we also discussed as well a period of flexibility when they do start with us, or they do start in the sixth form, where there's a swap don't drop option. So if a subject is not quite what they expected, they can, in those very early weeks, switch to another AS level, and that helps the transition. It makes the whole process a lot less daunting, and most of us in the group seem to agree that system works well.
Yeah, I think having those tasters, particularly when they're going from one setting to another, is absolutely vital, isn't it, for those young people, and particularly if they're a little bit vulnerable or have any additional needs, that is even more so. But that would be great, and if we could see that happening within schools, within partnerships between schools and colleges, that would be great. So is that going on in your school setting or college, vice versa? And if it isn't, what can we do to improve that provision and having that buffer to change and swap? I know we've got performance measures and retention rates, so that 8-week marker is maybe on our mind, but certainly giving students flexibility to change to maintain that retention is a great idea. So thank you, Paul. Really great feedback there.
Terrific.
Anybody else to add to that, please, before we nip off for that coffee? Anything else different? I don't know if Mary in the north, if anybody has come up with anything different there.
I don't know. Yeah, I'm sorry, Emma, we didn't join you at the right time. We hadn't realised that you were back in the room, but we have had some conversations that Izzy's happy to share with you.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you.
Sorry, so we were just talking quite similarly to I think what was discussed before with one of the other schools. So in terms of the transition, like it starts probably year 10, year 11 for us in terms of making sure students are well informed. And then we'll have a kind of parents' evening, which is sort of for our sixth form, and that kicks everything off. So that's when our applications open. We set the deadline for applications closing, so we can see how impactful that parents' evening's been based on the numbers are applying for our sixth form. Following on from that, all of the choices that students have made from that Microsoft form feed into our sort of like an Excel spreadsheet, which then becomes our live document. And as SLT, we all interview every student in year 11. So we know we've got the information on what subject students want to choose and can offer advice and guidance or inquire about future careers. That all goes onto the spreadsheet. So by the time we start sixth form, I've got an idea of the subject students want to do, what their future career aspirations are, but also on there we keep a log of all the students going to college, making sure, have you applied for college yet? Do you know how to do that? And the majority of them are pretty, on it. So that's really good, but that's just sort of how we run it and how we found it to be most impactful and making sure students are getting, access to those opportunities that are out there and best for them.
Fantastic. And that tracking and monitoring, isn't it, of their options and their decisions and their aspirations is really, really important. I'm sure that colleagues on the call are also doing that. And I'm not going to ponder on it, but I'm going to ask Sian to go on to the next slide, because I'm very aware it's 10:15. These are some of the things that I've highlighted that are just ideas of things that you do. So have a little look at them over your coffee or when you pop back. There's just a table that will be on the screen, and it's about, the learner voice and gathering that information, parental voice. Oh, sorry, it's gone back to the other one. Thank you. What are you using? Are you looking? I'm not saying you have to do every single one of these. It might be a little bit overwhelming, but are you looking at these? What are you doing within your setting to support those learners to make decisions? And certainly, if you wanted any further conversations after today, or for us to do further sessions, but we're looking at picking up individual strands that we think need more addressing in future, then we can talk about any of these again. But have a little look while you grab yourself a coffee. And if anybody wants a quick comment when we come back, we're more than happy to take those suggestions there. So thank you very much for your feedback. And also in the chat, I've popped a few of the documents I was talking about earlier, the transitions reform plan and some estimate reports about partnership working and recommendations of how to improve that within sixth form settings. So hopefully you can browse those in your own time and also have a look at the table there. But go and grab yourself a coffee, refreshed and ready to go. So just a little recap, because we've got those few minutes extra. So looking at the table, you probably are doing many of the things on there. And I was trying to look at maybe some that we haven't mentioned. So use of Careers Wales, didn't really hear that coming up. I'm sure it was in your breakout rooms, making sure you utilise Careers Wales to have those interviews. It is time consuming, isn't it, to interview every year 11 student. So if they could pick up maybe your college students while you prioritise your students you think are going to remain on A-level courses, and then you can have slightly later follow-up conversations once that initial information has been gathered, maybe by Careers Wales to support that. So that might be something, if you're not already utilising their skills to do so. And obviously they've got great knowledge on apprenticeships and workplace learning that we might not have such a grasp on, because it doesn't take up so much of our time as sixth form leaders. Working really hard on, this is a conversation we had between ourselves while you were in the breakout rooms, is how well are we linking with our Key Stage 4 team, even if we're within schools. We talked about that information sharing across establishments and outside and those partnerships, but how well do we work with our Key Stage 4 learners? Do we know exactly what those learners' needs are when they're coming up to us, or is it a given because they're staying within the same environment that we know all that information? So what is the communication like there? How are your Key Stage 4 contributing to transition planning? Is there anything you could go back and improve in your setting on that respect? Then I started looking, I thought subject webinars and taste days, that's very much something that we start with our learners when they get into year 12, and sometimes that's a little bit late because they've made the choices, and then we start to encourage that looking forward post-18 options, and we continue to supplement their desire to learn about that subject. But maybe we need to do a little bit more of that Key Stage 4. What's happened in the tutorial programme back in Key Stage 4 to make sure that those subjects are correct for them? Can we give them more subject webinars or taster days in Key Stage 4, and hopefully a lot of the SERIN students are getting those tasters, so that is happening now through the foundation in there. But if it's not, or are you aware of the provision that they are getting, so you're not replicating when they come into year 12 with you, and you're putting on something new? So what is the plan between over the 2 key stages? Taster sessions, we talked about those. I know Paul said it'd be great for them to come across to the college to have taster sessions within your same school of AS level study, so they know what to expect. When are you doing those? How often are you doing them? Is it a collapsed down day, a week? Is it in the spring term? Is it earlier before they do their options? So you're helping them with that. You know, we talked about teachers coming in and talking in assemblies. Well, that's great, but you know, there's nothing like actually doing and living and breathing that subject to know whether you like it or not. So is that in your programme? And if it isn't, where could that be slotted in to already busy schedule, but a really impactful bit of provision you could put in place for your learners to make those informed choices? I think we've talked about it, but learner voice and parent voice are absolutely vital, aren't they? Getting that feedback so we know exactly about the experience they've had. So we've put transition in place. We take a big sigh of, you know, relief. It's done. We've done our bit. But do we actually reflect on that in our self-evaluation? Do we get information from learner voice, parent voice to make sure that that transition was as we thought it went, and can any improvements be made for the following year? So simple Microsoft Forms again, or Google Forms, putting that in place, or conversations, focus groups. What are you doing to gather that information to review your transition process from year to year, because things do change? And then I was picking up on sort of resources, so any resources that you might use. And I've gone a bit sad, and I've gone Googling everything and what have you. So I'm just going to copy a load of links for you on things that I thought might support some of this work. So I'm just putting those in there. There are some tutorial transition resources that the cross-regional team developed just a couple of years ago that you can use in tutor time to support that transition, either used in Key Stage 4 or the very start of Key Stage 5, and the link is there for you. The subject transition resources have been produced widely by a range of people all over the country in conjunction with WJEC. So again, if you wanted to give those taster sessions but you couldn't get them in a classroom physically, could there be something that they could access at home, and then a reflection task on that with those subject transition resources? WJC have really stepped up their provision for student support. So if you go onto their website, the student section is great, and it's got about next steps. It's got links then onto the Carlum Cymru and eSchool sort of revision taster sessions there. So that might be something they might want to access to help make informed choices about their A-levels. And then the Welsh Government initiative of Power Up. So again, there's information there on GCSEs, A-levels, next steps, making decisions. So hopefully a few websites that you've seen, maybe a couple that are new to you, that might support any future planning there as you go forward. I think the only other one there we did touch on, or two, sorry, is effective tracking and monitoring of students. It sounds like some great work going out there to really know every individual learner. So is that robust within your setting? Just check on that when you go back and you're adjusting your plans. And then mentoring and peer mentoring of students. Really, really important. We talked about those one-to-one interviews. Does it stop after that one interview, or do you look at those students that maybe are really struggling with making the decisions? Is there a mentoring program in place? Can you give them further support throughout the year to make those informed decisions, and using your learners, whether it's current year 12, 13 students, students that come across from the college into your school to support and talk about that transition process, or your alumni that come back, you know, coming back and really mentoring students and helping them make good decisions about their choices, so that we can make sure they're on the right course from the outset, and not going neat, and remain on those courses and looking at an aspirational successful career in the future. I think the rest that you've probably talked about and are doing really, really well. Sian, Diane, did I miss anything you want to add there? No, they're shaking their heads. You know, hopefully you find that table useful to reflect on and to look at your provision. And please, if you need any further support with any transition, then just contact any of us. But obviously your local link can support you with that in any way going forward. So I think that's everything, unless anybody in the room would like to comment before we move on to Sian's section, where we were looking at post-18 transition. I'll take the silences. Hopefully we're all happy. So thank you, Sian, on to post-18.
Thank you, Emma. Thank you so much. Yes. And yeah, similar, we will sort of come back to some of these ideas in this next section. So, right, Right, the boot is going to be on the other foot now, colleagues. So we've spoken a lot about you as the, I suppose, the sender or the giver of young people from year 11 to year 12. So this is looking at what happens after they've been with you as post-18 learners. So you are going to be experiencing as a sort of the opposite situation now. So whereas, as I mentioned, we spoke about year 11, you're giving to either your sixth form or another provider. This is your opportunity to empathise really in terms of you giving to another party. So this next section is very much about post-18 learners, which you probably would recognise as your area of expertise, a critical part of your role. There are different considerations. They are going to be different partnerships to what we spoke about earlier this morning. There are things to think about, though. We still need to think about equity for all learners. We need to think about disadvantages or vulnerabilities of our young people as you're going to support them to transition out of school and college to their next big adventure. And, you know, and any other vulnerabilities that need to be taken into consideration. So our next little activity, again, back out in breakout rooms, is putting your post-18 hat on now. What does effective transition look like? What does it need to entail? Who needs to be involved? What about the timings of it? How do you manage it over the 2 years and to ensure that smooth and effective transition out of school or college? And how should it be planned? Okay, as Emma has mentioned previously, if you want to just take a screenshot or take a picture on your phone so you can remember what we're asking you to do. So this is about, you know, just an overview of what should be happening. Okay. Hope you had a good discussion. You may have felt more comfortable talking about this bit because I know you've all had to become experts in this field, transitioning out of your sixth form or post A levels. Right, okay, so what does it entail? Who needs to be involved? What about the timings and how should it be planned? Okay, so we'll start North Wales this time round. What views and comments have colleagues made in terms of answering some of these questions?
Hello, Mari's just had to pop out, so I'm just going to fill in if possible.
Oh, thank you, thank you.
No worries. So we were talking about how this can be a bit different. One of the things that came up for us was UCAS, and in terms of the transition for students to the next sort of placement, it's just making sure references and extenuating circumstances and additional learning needs are all recorded properly on the UCAS application process, you know, to provide universities with the information that they need to support students as well as they can. And we talked about sort of how close that communication is in terms of, you know, it's not perhaps as fluid as it is between us and our primary schools. But then some of the other colleagues in the room discussed the fact that, you know, at this point, it's about making sure parents are informed of the process, you know, and that parents understand that transition and how they can support, etc. We do things like mock interviews for university courses, so students, you know, if they are asked up for interview, they know what that will be like. And we work with lots of partnerships for that process. So we get universities in, local universities, employers, etc. We've got a doctor, he'll do it for our medicine students or dentistry students. We run, in our sort of PSHE lessons, we run sessions on budgeting. We've had a nutritionist in to talk about, you know, how students can feed themselves nutritional food whilst away, how to cook on a budget, particularly with the cost of living crisis, etc. And we did also have a conversation about sort of checking up on students who are not necessarily doing UCAS, because you can get that UCAS information, you know, on the students who have signed up and gone to university. But for those who don't, we just had the discussion about, do you call them? You know, for students taking a gap year, do we check in on them, etc. And some schools in the area will sort of pencil in phoning students on gap years and checking that they're okay. And we talked about the fact that a lot of students this year have applied for university despite finishing last year. And I think that's probably the effect of COVID as well. So yeah, lots of good conversation about post-18.
Lovely, thank you so much. Yeah, very robust, very rounded, thank you. And I know everyone on screen here this morning will recognise everything that you've said. Interestingly, you mentioned right at the start there, making sure that on the teacher reference, you make it crystal clear in terms of, you know, the value, the qualities, things that universities need to know about your learner. Okay, a standard practice, yes, you do need to be crystal clear about your school's situation, you know, in terms of levels of FSM, you know, where the learner sits in terms of their, you know, achievement abilities or their challenges that they've overcome. All that aspect is absolutely crucial. And I think taking that lovely example will enable you to empathise with that year 11 to year 12. So the information you're giving UCAS as a teacher reference, that's the sort of information that the, you know, the post-16 transition receiver also needs. So I hope that sort of makes you think, okay, yeah, absolutely. We need to make sure that this type of information is made available post-16 as well as post-18, because you're right, the last thing we want is drop out when they get to university. So the more information we can provide to universities, the better. You mentioned about involving parents. It would be interesting to know, as we get feedback from colleagues, what sort of activities or communication do you engage parents with when they're in post-16 provision? Yeah, mock interviews. Yeah, it's good to see that working with partners, providers. Again, going back to parents, parents are also employers. How are you using parents as a resource to aid post-16, post-18 transition? And yeah, pleased to hear it there about PSE, including budgeting, nutritional information, cooking on a budget. Absolutely. Post-16, the 2 years that they're with you is their passport to going out into the big wide world. And we're going to come on to looking at enrichment activities in the second half of this session now. But just, you know, be mindful of, you know, your role is so pivotal in terms of making them experience an effective transition. Those learners not doing UCAS, how are you ensuring that they have an equitable support mechanism? You know, some of them might want to get a job. Some of them might want to get a higher apprenticeship. So how are you supporting them as equally? So it's not all about UCAS. Okay. And I like that notion of phoning your learners that are on gap years. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, let's listen to some of the other groups now. I'm going to try and do this by memory. I know, Paul, you were in one group. Is there someone in your group who could feedback? Someone else could give some input into the conversation, talking about anything that we haven't already had feedback from colleagues in the north.
There was heavy discussion, Sean, in relation to communication with the universities. It seems that we all put on regular visits to Russell Group universities. So our relationship with the next step above us is very good. And there does seem to be an agreement with all of us as well that monitoring student performance and within that, constantly asking them about their future and what they're looking to progress to is a regular conversation. And we've got different ways in which we hold that data and that information, but that's kind of, there was an agreement within the breakout room in relation to that. But and what was said in North Wales, yeah, we echo, you know, the very things that are being done there as well.
Yeah, that's interesting you say that, Paul. You're right, because young people, and you know, I was young once, and I remember being in sixth form not having a clue what I wanted to do, and I'm sure you will all be nodding, saying, "Yeah." In when they're in, you know, first year AS levels or year 12, the vast majority do not know. So it is important to keep checking in with them, you know, keep reviewing and reevaluating. And that should be ongoing throughout that first year. Yeah. Yeah, thanks, Paul. Thank you for that. Thank you. Greg, your group, anybody who would like to feedback from your group?
Sorry, I was just wandering around, just moving rooms. No, we were just talking about most people are on kind of this UCAS conveyor belt that kind of never stops from year 12 to year 13. But I think there are gaps to expand kind of the apprenticeship route, because I think everybody is really kind of focused on UCAS. There's that, maybe that gap in knowledge, but also we were talking about the issue that kind of physical geography will have, that more isolated, you know, kind of schools will have kind of less opportunities, really.
Okay. Yeah, good point, actually. Good point. Yeah, demographics and location is important, especially colleagues mentioned earlier about having universities come in. Well, that's all well and good, but you need to have sort of university on your doorstep to come in the first place. But obviously, you know, with technology advancing as it is, you've got the opportunity for them to be zoomed in, big screen on Teams, to be presenting workshops to young people, to incentivize them, to motivate them, to inspire them, to help with the decision-making process. So yeah, you know, there's lots, of course, the bulk of your learners are going to university. We know that, and they're going to a wide range of universities, whether they're local or further afield, or indeed international. But yeah, it is critical that you keep an eye on and equally support those who are not. Because you will have one or two who, for whatever reason, get cold feet, change their mind, or are set on wanting a higher apprenticeship in industry, or set on getting a job, you know, in an accountancy field, or, you know, hospitality, or whatever desires that they have. So it's really important that you support them as well, you know, working with colleagues in Careers Wales, you know, engaging with local employers, and again, using parents as a resource. Have you ever asked your parents if they would like to come and support and help in terms of, you know, knowledge of industries and opportunities and insights into pathways and potential careers? So something to think about. Thanks, Greg. Another group, again, I'm going from memory, was Sian in one of the groups, a different group? If so, would you be someone be able to feedback from that group, please?
Yeah, we were talking about how in the PANT they sort of split the tutor groups as to their careers. So I also split tutor groups, but more for definitely chosen university and apprenticeships, and then the don't knows. But what I thought was interesting, they split them into sort of the health and medics, and that tutor group is run by a head of faculty or somebody who teaches that subject that can give them the careers advice from a tutor perspective, which I thought was quite nice. We were discussing the kinds of things we get, like webinars and enrichment programs, and having Careers Wales to deliver the sessions, and also student finance. You know, like a few of us have had USW in to talk about student finance with the parents, which was really useful, but they also do it online, and Student Finance Wales do webinars as well. I think it was a case of what we were mainly discussing is that we don't have all the answers, and the more external people that we can use, the better. And definitely when it comes to apprenticeships and work placements, using Careers Wales more and utilising them, I think was generally what we were discussing. I missed the beginning bit, so I had to go and tell someone off in the library. So,
No,
so if anybody wants to add anything from my group that I missed, but that was the gist of the bit that I got. So
perfect. It's perfect, Sian. Thank you. No, that's very, very apt, because you've mentioned something different from other colleagues who fed back. Yeah, I like that notion of tutor groups. So you're getting groups of like-minded learners together to really drill down and focus on the key aspects. Yeah,
can I just add to that? I think we've all got really good contacts. So, you know, it takes up time to build up as well, isn't it? You know, with the universities and careers. But it would be really good if we could share our contacts and maybe, you know, have a place, because we're now this community, we're all meeting together, and it'd be lovely if I could share some of my contacts, because we have a lot of speakers in. And sometimes, you know, I'll pass it on to my consortium school, but sometimes I think, oh, I wonder who I could approach there. And I just wonder whether that's a good practice for all of us, is to share what we've got, because we're all in it together. It's not a case of I'm going to keep my contacts and do nothing with it. But I'm building it up. I've got a database, but I'm more than happy to share what I've got and the speakers with it as well.
Thank you so much. Sorry, I can only see your initials, S. Noel Hughes. What's your first name? Sarah?
It's Sarah, yeah. Sorry,
yes.
My camera's not working. I've had a disaster with the computer today.
No, don't worry. I think we all have today. It was definitely little gremlins in the system today. Sarah, thank you so much for saying that. I know I can see people nodding on the screen. Yeah, that would be extremely welcome, and we could easily do that. You know, we've done Jamboards in the past, and we could set something up on our team site where colleagues can drop in and share contacts. You're right, you're all on the same journey, the same mission, the same yearning to do the very best for your learners, and the more we can share, the better. So yeah, absolutely, we can respond to that positively. Point about student finance with parents. If you don't do that or haven't planned to do that, we would all strongly recommend that you do that. Going back to Diane's piece about poverty and the impact of the current cost of living crisis, there is extreme anxiety in the system, in families, about the cost of going to university. We need to get rid of the myths about the cost of going to university, to relax that anxiety, and to absolutely not make finance a barrier to going to university. You know, there are many reasons why.
There's so much misinformation out there, isn't there? So I think that is key when you're supporting your most vulnerable learners, definitely.
Yeah, you're quite right. Yeah, okay. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, that's just a little plea from us, really. Do it not just with the learners, do it with parents as well, because it will potentially have significant impact on a young person's future. Have I missed any groups out at all? Or is there anything else that anybody wants to add to the mix of what's already been offered as feedback?
Nothing in terms of that, Sian, but just while people are thinking, I've just popped a couple of apprenticeship links in the chat as well to support people if they feel that there may be a little bit of a gap in their knowledge there.
Lovely, thank you so much. And the other one I'm just going to put in, as whilst you're saying that, Emma, is this website, which has been created through Open University with resources provided by Welsh universities. You may already be using this, but it is about, it's called University Ready. It's very appropriate for year 12s and year 13s to aid transitions. It's got loads of resources on there. And in fact, I will share, they are doing a little 20-minute input next week, and all colleagues are welcome to attend. They're going to just walk through this website to explain how it should be used, what the resources are there for learners and both for staff. So I'll put the link before the end of the session to the Teams meeting with the timings in a short while for you. Right, so just in summary, thank you so much everyone for your feedback. It was all very spot on, appropriate and relevant. I think the only thing we didn't really talk about was timings, but you need to get going from year 12 onwards, I would say, with everything you've described, because we all know that those 2 years absolutely fly by. So this is just a summary, similar to what Emma presented earlier, with the nuanced differences of, you know, what does effective post-18 transition look like? You know, just to see what's slightly different. Support with writing CVs, letters of application, again, you know, maybe relevant to those who are not going to university. Mock interview practice was mentioned, effective parental engagement. I don't think I can't see alumni on there. Alumni, they are critical. They're gold nuggets. They are past pupils from your school or college, inviting them back in to talk about their journey from school or college to university, school or college to employment, apprenticeships. They can bring such a different dynamic to young people's inspiration and aspiration. So if you are not already building a bank of your past pupils, please do so. Bring them back in. You know, certainly the ones that have gone to university have big holidays. They have a month off at Christmas, a month off at Easter. So invite them in for a cup of tea and mince pies, or a cup of tea and an Easter egg, whatever. And, you know, get them delivering workshops. They can either deliver on, you know, Teams or Zoom from their dormitories in university, but they can be very powerful in terms of supporting that transition to higher education. Okay. All right. Thank you, everyone. Okay, so good feedback, and hopefully you picked up some new additional tips and ideas there. Okay, in the last session, you gave us loads of ideas in terms of different providers, external providers that you work with in support of your learners. I'm going to put the list back up on the page. I'd like to know, again, in the spirit of sharing, if you volunteered some of the ideas onto that Jamboard and the partners that you've worked with, if you would like to just say why you use who you use and what the impact, the positive impact on your learners has been. So I'm going to share the document. So give me 2 seconds, but if you can just think about that. Can you see that? Can I ask my colleagues in the room, can you see that? Yeah. Emma, perfect. Can you see it? Okay. Yeah, okay, yeah. So this is what you told us last time in session 3. Because our question was, what support agencies or partnerships are you working in to support your learners? So my question is now is not just about why you use them, but what impact has using these organisations had on supporting your learners in the round. And this will be our segue to going on to the next topic, which is around enrichment. So I'm going to put someone on the spot now. For example, the Anna Freud partnership. I'm going to ask if Rian, would you mind speaking about that? What difference working with that organisation or that resource has for your learners, just to kick us off the conversation?
On the Freud website, a lot of people don't know about it, but it's very informative with regards to mental health. It gives them information, relevant information, information they can look into instead of us sort of putting it up on a whiteboard or whatever, you know. It's independent. There's plenty of numbers there, plenty of strategies to support them with their learning, strategies to support them, you know, with anything really with regards to low mood, anxiety, but we've just found it really helpful for our learners across the whole school, not just our sixth formers, whole school.
Okay, lovely, thank you. So what sort of things have learners who've engaged with it said to you?
That it sort of highlights things maybe they know already, but you know, it's different from us teachers telling them something. It's getting that information from professionals who have that, you know, with regards to mental health, anxiety, different aspects. They hear that from the professionals themselves and not just us as teachers telling them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's why having, you know, those relationships with partners, with alumni, with, you know, universities, all singing from the same hymn sheet can enable the pennies to drop, I suppose. Yeah. Okay. Diolch, Rhian. Anybody else would like to say something about what they posted on this Jamboard last session? Why they use this resource and what the impact has been on learners?
I don't mind talking about some step-up programmes. So based in Pembrokeshire, as far west as we are, we have, as mentioned by our group, so our locality means that it's a fair trek to our nearest university. We qualify for quite a lot of outreach and step-up programmes because of our catchment and our free school meals and things like that. So like this morning we've had Swansea University do a computer science masterclass. We've got another one on Thursday, and for the next sort of 3 weeks during the mentor time in the morning, sort of different topics are being talked about to try and give an insight into different things on offer at university. So not necessarily to try and get them to go to Swansea, but to try and get them to think about subjects that they could look at studying. Because obviously we're really struggling funding wise for cover and for buses and things to get us to go. I mean, to get to Cardiff is probably looking about, you know, about an £800 bus, for example. It's just not viable at the moment. So having this sort of virtual access to masterclasses and the step-up programs where the students can actually sign up for a subject program and do some assignments and do some online sort of lectures with the lecturers at university, they can have an insight into subjects to try and make their summer project. So this is mainly focused for year 12. So in this summer, when they come back and they do their project on UCAS, they've got a bit of a foundation in place already, so that they, you know, they've got more chance. We talked about the dropout rate at university. So if we lay this foundation, hopefully that they're going to apply for something, you know, that they know about, they know what to expect, and then, you know, the likelihood is hopefully that will reduce the risk of them dropping out of university then.
Perfect. Thank you so much. That was very eloquently explained. You're absolutely right. And again, going back to that transition key stage 4, key stage 5, yeah, that's why we spoke about doing taster sessions in A levels, didn't we? Because the learners need to, in their, you know, decision making, the more information and support we can provide to enable them to make the best possible decision at that time. Exposure to different subjects and input from different subjects is absolutely crucial, and that exposure to what it would be like to study in that particular environment. So the more that we can do, the better. And bringing, you know, people to the learners, especially if, you know, transport or accessibility is difficult, is absolutely crucial. So absolutely, thank you for that information. So I think the point here really is about, you know, in your working with resources or partnerships, being really clear about what the benefits are. And to be quite honest, if there aren't any benefits, you might want to reconsider why you do what you do. You know, it shouldn't be just about filling a space, and could there be other partnerships that you could develop to improve the learner experience further. So that's really the point of the exercise. But this is shared in our team space anyway, if you want to pick it up and have a look at some of the activities. And again, it's, you know, it's an opportunity to just share practice. So I'm just going to bring that down now. And has the PowerPoint disappeared completely now, everybody? Yeah, Emma, would you mind just sharing the other one back up, please?
Sorry about the disco as it loads up there.
Okay. Lovely, thank you very much. I shall just go through. So we've got some little bit of interference at the moment. Oh, thank you, colleagues. Right, just moving on then. Okay, so the next thing that topic of conversation is around enrichment. Okay, because some of the things that you've mentioned since our coffee break is someone mentioned about was supporting young people with budgeting skills, with how to cook on a budget, you know, the key aspects of looking after yourself. So we just wanted to move into this topic really to understand or to have a conversation about what enrichment activities are taking place in school, college, to enable that seamless transition from your environment into the big wide world, I suppose. So we're just going to play this little video, she says. Emma, would you mind playing the video if you could, please? Just to, this is a little case study, a snapshot of one young person's experience in sixth form.
Great, and if there's any problems, if anybody can't hear it, please shout out and we'll make sure everybody's accessing the video effectively. Here we go.
Colleagues, yeah. Okay, I hope you find that really insightful. I don't know if schools, colleagues here today know the Toe by Toe programme or have engaged with it at all. But I think there were some lovely messages coming out of that video, how the young person spoke about how it was developing her leadership skills, ability to support and mentor others and support them to progress in their skills development. She spoke about developing literacy skills of the persons that the young person she was mentoring, as well as her own, you know, improving her own oracy skills. She spoke about it, you know, it would stand me in good stead when I was going for interview, for example, because I feel as if it's raised my confidence. So we just wanted to show you that, as I said, as just an example of what do we mean by enrichment, you know. And what sort of things that you're currently doing, what else do you think you could be doing? You know, that certainly aspects such as a critical skill such as oracy. You know, we have young people in our education system who, you know, may be academically very enabled, they're hard workers, they're students, they've got a lot to give, but maybe oracy and their ability to communicate, to present themselves is not where it should be in terms of giving them every opportunity to succeed further down the line. So is there something that you could be doing to enrich and better support that aspect, for example? So with that in mind, we're going to have our final little breakout room for the next probably 10 minutes at the absolute most, because we'll then be rounding off the day, just to talk and share ideas about what enrichment you have been doing, what enrichment you think you could be doing moving forward, and just speak about what skills or competencies it is that you're trying to develop. So Helen, if you wouldn't mind just sorting out the breakout rooms again for the final time, I'd be very obliged. Thank you very much. If I may, because time is against us as per usual, if I can just quickly feedback from the conversation that took place in our group, and then if anybody would like to add. I think we sort of consensually all agreed that enrichment in various guises is critical in terms of developing young people's leadership skills. We spoke about safeguarding certificates for young people who are mentoring younger people, younger learners, level 1 in safeguarding. And one of the colleagues on screen offered to do level 1 safeguarding in other schools if they would like, but that's on condition that she is offered something else back. So something to certainly follow up. But I think two things really. We all agree enrichment is essential to develop all the essential skills of young people who are going into the big wide worlds before you know it, that we can offer some additional qualifications to support them in terms of, for example, safeguarding, in terms of supporting them to become effective mentors or buddies, so they've got the confidence to actually deliver some of those activities, as well as how do we weave in some of the other aspects that we spoke about earlier. So can I just ask for volunteers, is there anything that you spoke about in your group that you could share with us here now, please?
We didn't nominate a volunteer, but I'm more than happy, if my group don't mind, that I quickly do feedback before anyone else. Some great work going on, really about sort of raising self-esteem, self-confidence of young people and setting them up with the skills they need, you know, for their future. So lots of paired reading schemes, subject ambassadors working within the school and within the local feeder primary schools, so opportunities there. Some paid provision, Positively You. The study skill sessions were very well received by students and parents. Even they knew had impact because parents, you know, commented on how much fun their students had had and how much they'd learned in that first week. Some team building companies, so lots of people paying for some additional to really look after these learners after they've had a tough few years. Liz mentioned Colourworks, which I don't know, so she might want to come and talk about that, looking at their sixth forms being wellbeing mentors and training them up and getting, again, that official training and recognition for mentoring, and talking about the difficulties of work experience and getting meaningful enrichment from work experience is getting more and more difficult. So looking at how you can build and develop and put into a timetable some in-house work experience, whether that be with IT technicians or in different departments, and using the resources within the school to support that. So I thought that was really interesting as well. So lots of really positive enrichment going on from our group.
Thanks, Emma. Thank you. And just picking up on that point of the time to do this, one colleague mentioned about your sixth forms going into tutorial times, and you know, delivering different aspects in response to need. Okay, so how do you weave it into the curriculum? After school clubs, some sixth formers and post-16 learners are supporting after school clubs with Key Stage 3, for example. One school mentioned about putting on support for driving lessons, and again, that, you know, that indirectly could potentially support those young people who wouldn't ordinarily have the opportunity to do that sort of activity. So thanks, Emma. Anybody else from the other groups? Anything we've missed? You mentioned there about Colourworks. Was a colleague able to just expand on that?
Yeah, that was me. It's just something our SLT and middle leaders and things are encouraged to undertake. I'm sure other companies are doing it, but it's about your leadership style and just considering and it like colour categorises like different parts of your personality, and it's just about, so it's basically like a leadership course, but they do a pupil friendly one as well, and so we just offer it out to all of year 12 in the first term if anyone would like to do it, and it's kind of I think about 3 sessions over the course of the year then that they kind of just sit in a room and they do this online leadership course basically.
Okay, all right, thank you so much for that. Thank you.
Welcome.
I'm conscious that we've only got a few minutes left now. I think my suggestion, or our suggestion moving forward, would be very much about you know, maybe you could do a learner voice to find out what skills young people would like to develop, or what aspects they feel that they lack confidence in. And this is going to be very much contextualized to your organization, your demographic of learner, and also your, you know, your, it's really. So I think lots to be gained from enrichment, and certainly not an aspect to be overlooked. So I hope you got some key points from that. And I've just put on the slide there some of the key considerations, you know, why it's important, how do you communicate that to others, the importance of having enrichment, what opportunities can you evoke, and, you know, what are the challenges that you may need to overcome in terms of, for example, timing, or where do you put it in the curriculum. Okie dokie. Thanks, everyone. Yes, and here's a little one for you. That other slide was, you know, so walking away from today, what action do you intend to take during the next half term to development? Maybe develop maybe something new within the enrichment arena for your learners? Okay, right. Would you believe it? We've come to the very end, not only of this session today, but the whole programme for the time being. I think there's two things to say, really. We hope that you have enjoyed the experience, in particular of being able to work with colleagues. You all have the same common denominator. You all have the same age group of young people that you are extremely keen and compassionate about supporting to the very best that you can. So I hope you've got a lot out of the last sessions, the 4 sessions that we've delivered. What we'd like to do following today is to arrange a catch-up with you, like a follow-up conversation, and we'll do that per region. So with myself and colleagues on the screen, we'll be in touch, either a conversation over a cup of coffee in situ, in school or college, or in Teams if time is against us, just to have a conversation in terms of what you've got out of the programme, what you plan to do next, and what else we can do to support you in terms of further professional learning. Because for us, the journey doesn't stop here today. You know, we will be looking to continue supporting you, whether it's workshops, one-off workshops around current demand or provision or aspects of post-16 education that we all need to keep abreast of, but there will certainly be more to follow from this particular programme. And there is still the offer of coaching and mentoring if you would like support. We've already had many colleagues sign up for that, and we'll be in touch shortly in terms of making that connection between you and the person who is going to support you in that capacity. So Diane, Emma, is there anything else that I need to say at this point before we say not goodbye, but just au revoir?
Just please, from me, could you fill out the final evaluation form that you can see on the left there? Either scan the QR code with your camera on your phone. Oh, actually, you can't click on the link. Maybe you can click on the link. I don't know if you click on the link. Have a go and see if it opens it up from there. If not, I'll try and pop it in the chat in a moment, because your feedback is really valuable, and we do use it to inform our future training and to support you going forward for the future. So if you could spend a couple of minutes, please, before you leave the call to complete that evaluation, that would be great. And just in terms of the coaching, I know Helen's been working really hard because so many of you have requested. You can click on the link. Thanks, Jose. That's great. So many of you have requested coaches. We've had to go beyond, so it might not necessarily be a coach in education. We've got some real high level people who are willing to coach you in the NHS about transforming the NHS. So it doesn't matter that they're not subject specialists. You will get quality coaching, sort of level 7, top level coaches that might be assigned to you in coaching. That email should be coming out later today. So if you have applied for coaching already, that is on its way. If not, please feel free to scan the QR code there and request that on the back of today's session.
Diane?
No, just thank you very much for all your contributions over the 4 sessions. It's been really insightful for us. So yeah, thank you. Diolch yn fawr iawn I chi gyd.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Diane. Yeah, and I have to say that we always ourselves learn so much from being with colleagues in this environment. So thank you ever so much for everybody's contribution. And thank you to Helen as well, hidden behind the scenes, behind the camera, for organising the logistics, including the breakout rooms. Thanks, Helen. And yes, so without further ado, it's just gone 1 minute past 12. Have a good afternoon, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day. We'll be in touch. Thank you. Diolch yn fawr iawn.
Bye, Mary.